Hello everyone, welcome to another Monday movie. I'm Mr. Blue Summers. So this week I've been noticing, I think, a misalignment of expectations with regards to my depth of field primer on my website, which you can read, www.mrbluesummers.com. I think people are going to that primer expecting a tutorial, which is a step-by-step walkthrough about how to use a particular feature or to do a specific technique. Whereas what I wrote was a primer, which is an introduction to the concepts that you need in order to follow tutorials, in order to better understand the tools at your disposal. So for that, I'm sorry. And that's why I've produced this Monday movie, which is going to be a depth of field tutorial. So I'm going to show you how to use depth of field in Mental Ray and in the scanline renderer. So let's get started. I'm going to take a quick render here, show you what we're working with. I've gone ahead and created a simple scene with some teapots of different colors. It's a skylit render, nothing special. And this is what we're going to get started with as far as the scanline renderer goes. So in order to add depth of field in scanline, we need to create an effect. We need to create a global effect. And we do that by clicking on rendering and going to our environment panel, which brings up environment and effects. I'm going to click on the Effects tab, and I get my list of effects. I haven't added anything yet. And I'm going to click Add. I'm going to add a new effect, a new depth of field effect. Click OK. So now I get my depth of field parameters, and what I need to do here is tell depth of field which camera to use, which node to use as the focal point, so which object is going to be sharp, and how to treat the blurry effect. So how blurry do I want this image? So let's jump through it. I'm going to click on Pick Camera, and I'm going to select my rendering camera. Then I'm going to click on Pick Node, and I'm going to pick my blue teapot. And it looks like I'm all set. But instead of just rendering, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this interactive checkbox. And that's going to take a quick render for me that will allow me to see the effect of my changes on the depth of field effect in real time. It really is a cool tool. You're going to like this. So there we go. It's rendered out, a full render with the blurry effect. But I can, for example, lock these two spinners together, and I can turn down the blurriness effect. And you'll see that green teapot way far away getting sharper and sharper. Or I can make it very blurry. I can turn this really far up to 20. And that makes the effect very blurry, very far away. So it's a wonderful effect. And you're going to find that Mental Ray is even easier to set up than this. So let's get to it. I'm going to go ahead and delete this effect. I don't want the blurry anymore. Close out these windows. And you'll have to excuse me for a second. I need to reset some of these lighting parameters. Turn on this light, which I've gone ahead and created. It's an area light. And I need to turn down the ambient lighting. A lot of times your special lighting setups won't come across from the scanline renderer to Mental Ray, so you have to kind of do what you can. So I've opened up my render panel. I'm going to go ahead and switch renderers to Mental Ray. And I'm going to take a quick render to show you what we're working with. Make sure everything's working properly. Okay. It's not as appealing as the skylight, but, bear with me. In Mental Ray, the depth of field parameters are not stored in the effects panel, but instead on the camera itself. So I'm going to select my camera that's creating this render, and I'm going to click on my Modify panel. And down here at the very bottom, you'll find the multi-pass effect group. And this is where you set up depth of field. I'm going to click on Enable. And one thing that's very, very important is that depth of field for Mental Ray should not use the original depth of field, but instead depth of field with Mental Ray in parentheses. And that's because this is a very specifically set up depth of field effect. It's easier to control, it's easier to manipulate, and it gives you really great results quickly. So the way that it works is there are only two parameters. There's the target distance, which is the target for the camera, and the f-stop value, which if you read the primer, you'll find out that that controls how quickly objects become blurry as they get farther away from your focal point, from your target distance. So in our case, I've set this to 0.1. I'm going to go ahead and set it to 0.2 for simplicity, and I'm going to re-render in the wrong viewport. Here we go. And you'll see that the blue teapot is going to be sharp, but as things get farther away from the blue teapot, in a gradient, they become blurrier and blurrier. And that's exactly the effect that we're looking for. Now I've set the value to 0.2 for this f-stop, and the lower the value, the blurrier objects will get as they're moving away from the target distance from the camera. But for higher values, you can create very subtle depth of field effects. You can see that the green teapot in the background is almost totally blurred out. For higher values, if I set this to, for example, 2 for my scene, and then I render, you'll find that the effect is very subtle. You might not even see it after this video is compressed. But it's there, and it's very gentle. And that's really the essence of this technique. That's the essence of using depth of field, is making it so subtle that the viewer can't see it. They can't see it. They won't notice it. They won't be, ugh, this image is blurry. They'll say, oh wow, this image is so realistic. And that's what you're looking for, and that's what this Monday movie is about. So until next week, feel free to play around with depth of field and see what it can do for you. It's a very powerful tool when used properly. And as a bit of opinion, I do prefer using the mental ray depth of field. I think it's easier to control, and it gives you a little bit of an easier setup with a more realistic effect. Don't forget to tune in next week for another Monday movie. Until then, take care. Happy rendering.